The earliest days of bourbon whiskey likely date to a Virginia swamp, where roughly a quarter of America's colonial population was massacred in 1622 during the Powhatan Uprising. Almost 400 years later, a visit to the swamp is much more pleasant. The Berkeley Plantation, about 20 miles upriver from Jamestown, sits in the middle of it and was briefly the home of Captain George Thorpe, one of the first Americans believed to have distilled liquor from corn. The finer details of his efforts are vague, which can sometimes give Thorpe's story the feel of a legend. But what is certain is that he was eagerly exploring the New World's potential riches when the native grain caught his eye. In America, corn grew better than the barley that Europeans used to create beer and spirits, and Thorpe wondered if it could be used instead. Berkeley today is a working museum, and historians speculate that the carpet of grass where I'm standing on the day I visit is where Thorpe had his original still, and also where attackers during the uprising bludgeoned him to death and dismembered his corpse. Before his unfortunate demise, Thorpe was a living paradox. Here was a New World fortune-seeker who condemned his fellow colonists' bigoted attitude toward American Indians. A humanitarian as well as an inquisitive explorer, Thorpe was enthusiastic about his new home and its native people. Where his countrymen were skeptical of America's native corn, Thorpe wrote back to London championing the grain, hoping it could be used for a drink that would raise morale and reduce the death rate caused in part by unsafe drinking water. He owned a still, but he wasn't a professional distiller looking to create an industry. America for the next century would consist mainly of cottage industries supporting the larger economies of old world empires busily carving up the continent. Rather, Thorpe was a curious amateur, feeling out his new home, trying to recreate the comforts of his past life in England by experimenting with an unfamiliar grain. His early efforts likely tasted more like paint thinner than what we today recognize as bourbon. Regardless, the act of distilling a distinctive New World grain was a break from Old World tradition and the first step toward a uniquely American whiskey. A forerunner of the more refined corn-based whiskey that would evolve centuries later, here was bourbon's Big Bang.